Hey there, Autism Fitness founder Eric Chessen, leading the movement for movement, bringing you another edition of Autism Fitness Tuesday training, where I take a concept, a strategy, something that we use in autism fitness programming, and bring it to you so that you can use it in your own programs for the autism and neurodivergent population, or in your own program as well. So before we get started, please definitely subscribe, and share these videos with someone for whom you think it might make a difference, whether small or gigantic. In this edition of Autism Fitness Tuesday training, I'm going to be discussing the perfect repetition. Well, not really. So when we talk about mastery of a skill, and this comes back to the clinical practice of applied behavior analysis in looking objectively at independent performance. So at what point is an individual independently capable of performing a skill? In this case, of course, we're talking about exercise, independently, so on their own, without additional prompting, cueing, or input. Now, with fitness, even though we can always follow best practice guidelines, and of course there is going to be a point, as there should be, where someone becomes independent with an exercise, there are certain variables that we really have to consider because it's nuanced, right? And of course, individuals are going to vary in their capabilities, and we're going to take that into consideration. But at the same time, it's not as though everybody is so unique and so individual that independence is going to look different for everybody, because at that point you couldn't quantify, qualify, and categorize it. So there'd be no point to saying that independence in fitness performance or exercise performance doesn't even exist, or doesn't exist. And that's not the case. The case is that it does exist. We can guide our athletes to the point where they are independent with an exercise. But first, we have to operationally define and examine some of the properties or capabilities that are going to lead us to making that statement, or checking off that box of the athlete is finally independent with this exercise. So with respect to the types of exercises that we utilize in autism fitness programming, we're talking about strength exercises. So as I've mentioned numerous times before, and if this is your first video in the series, and you want to go back to the hundreds of other videos that I've posted in the past, you are going to get some redundancy for good reason, because we're going to talk about the movement areas of strengthening and hypertrophy, the development of lean mass and motor skills, namely pushing, pulling, squatting, hinging, and carrying. These are going to be the major movement patterns that are the foundation for all others, regardless of what else anybody says. These are going to be the pillars. I said the foundation, but also the pillars. Foundational pillars, that could be the case, of movement skills. You cannot have quality movement without underlying strength and stability, so it makes sense to have strength and stability as the majority of movement programming that you are utilizing, right? For both the neurotypical and the neurodivergent population. So that's why we're not talking necessarily about steady state cardio or flexibility exercises or even any of these. We still need strength as an underlying component. So strength wins again. It doesn't mean it's the only modality. It doesn't mean it's the only modality to do if you enjoy something else. It just means it's the only modality that's really going to help develop or enable some of those motor skills. You can't have good motor skills without underlying strength and motor planning, right? I think I said that twice in two slightly different ways, but I digress and I move forward. So we look at these major movement patterns, again, pushing, pulling, squatting, hinging, carrying, in a variety of different movement patterns. And then we say, let's take one exercise. Let's look at a push-up, for example, something that we utilize in autism fitness programming, something that I utilize in my own program for that matter. And we say, all right, if we have an athlete who is not yet at, I'm going to start throwing out some terminology here, not yet at standard in their baseline. What does standard mean? Standard means that they can perform that push-up at a level of performance that is controlled, that is with a full range of motion, I'll come back to those two, and for sufficient sets and repetitions, meaning total volume, that they are deriving a training effect out of it. Again, the training effect is what we are striving for. The training effect means that the body has to change and adapt in accordance with a stressor. In this case, a good stressor, so that pushing motion against gravity, the body, particularly chest, shoulders, triceps, have to get stronger in order to rise and lower to the challenge there. So that athlete becomes stronger over time because the body is adapting to that particular stress over those subsequent sessions, right? Pretty easy to follow along. We need consistency. We need a particular training stimulus, and then we're going to have that outcome. So it's input and then output. The training effect being that output. Now, when we have an athlete who is not yet able to perform that exercise to standard, which is highly common, especially for our autism and neurodivergent athletes, it does not mean, okay, let's take 3 or 4 or 5 different other accessory exercises or corrective exercises. Like, let's just get better at the push-up so that we can, I don't know, get better at doing the push-up. But just having the athlete do the push-up over and over again at that same level of challenge, and I've done other videos on this, is insufficient because the athlete still has that strength deficit. So we need to modify that exercise, make it simpler. In the case of the push-up, maybe going from the knees to a box so that we're reducing the total amount of an individual's body that they have to push up and then control on the way down. I have other videos on that as well, and it's part of our Autism Fitness Certification curriculum. So in the event that we have to modify an exercise for an athlete, and that event, again, is quite common among our ASD athletes, it means that their baseline is not yet at standard performance. So as that athlete continues to practice that exercise and continues to progress towards that standard, we are moving closer, or they are moving closer, towards mastery of the exercise. Now, what's really cool is it doesn't mean that just because an athlete has not yet reached standard for an exercise, that the exercise is not benefiting them. What's really cool is that even as an athlete is performing a modified version of the push-up or an overhead press or a cable row or a squat, they are still deriving a strength and stability and in many cases cardiovascular and stamina benefit from that exercise. It's just not yet at a point where we can say that it is independently mastered because we are still providing some type of modification. Now, with respect to modifications, sometimes it's not just the physical modification or simplifying the exercise. Sometimes it is an additional cue or prompt that we're providing the athlete. So, for example, we may provide a mirror prompt for our athletes and demonstrate the exercise in front of them, mirroring or having them mirror our motion so that they have a visual representation of the exercise that we are doing. The mirror prompt is really important for athletes who may have some motor planning deficits and can't yet really feel that movement for what it's supposed to be. When you hear other professionals talk about the mind-muscle connection, it's just that. It's that body awareness of how far out am I moving? Am I moving with control? Is my rate of movement appropriate? Gauging all of these things is a long-term process for many of our ASD athletes. So we want to consider that in order to scaffold or meet the athlete where they are at with their current particular performance, we may need to provide a mirror prompt for them and occasionally some type of verbal cueing. Now, I caution here because one of the biggest things that we want to stay away from is overcoaching the athlete and using too much verbiage to get a point across or to instruct the athlete on how to do a particular exercise. And that's why the mirror prompt becomes so crucial, because it enables us to avoid overcoaching the athlete. But let's move on and discuss independence and what it actually means. So we have to modify an exercise sometimes because the athlete doesn't have the physiological capability. So there's a strength or there's a stability or motor planning deficit. And there also may be a cognitive, in terms of the kinesthetic awareness and motor planning deficit, as far as the athlete getting the movement of the exercise. Maybe they haven't done it before. They probably haven't done it before. And if that's the case, then they're going to need a lot of practice before that motor memory or that muscle memory starts to take shape. No pun intended there. Pun kind of intended. So as the athlete moves into being able to perform that exercise towards standard, meaning we can kind of back off as coaches and the athlete is able to complete that exercise with confidence, capably, through that full range of motion, motor control, they've got it, and they can do it for, on average, 3 or 4 sets of anywhere from 8 to 10 and even more repetitions with that full range of motion and motor control. The range of motion is going to differ per exercise. Of course, we have our criteria for each one, so that instead of like a half or quarter rep, we're getting that full lockout on an overhead press or a push-up or a squat. All right? So where do we get independence? Independence is where the athlete can go and do a set of those do 3 or 4 sets of that exercise with minimal cueing. And I say minimal cueing because the athlete may not be completely 100% independent with an exercise, as is the case with many neurotypical people. That's why we hire coaches or video ourselves to get feedback, because sometimes an exercise feels a certain way, and then we look back on the video and say, oh, you know, I really should have brought my feet out a little bit more, or maybe my hand or shoulder or elbow positioning was a little bit off. This is more technical, but nonetheless important. So it's not to say with independence that the athlete is never going to need coaching again, because if we look at not only neurotypical individuals, but elite level performers, many of them, if not most of them, have coaches. Why? Because it's very difficult to get feedback on your own, right? So for our autism and neurodivergent athletes, the goal of independence is not that they don't necessarily need ongoing coaching. It's that during that session, they don't need as much coaching. They understand the expectation for performance of a given exercise, and they're able to execute it without a lot of additional setup or cueing, or the coach stepping in and modifying a stance or modifying hand position, because these are things that are going to come up every now and again, and that's fine. Everybody has that situation or those sessions where something just doesn't feel right, and you need a little objective expertise from someone else coming in. So the independence is not to say that our athletes don't reach that level until they can do the entire workout on their own, because if we held them all to that standard, well, let me tell you, most neurotypical people never reach that, where they can do an entire and sensible and effective workout on their own. Sorry, it's just the truth. Ever been to a commercial gym? I have, and well, a lot of it's not pretty. Anyway, so moving on from there. With independence, what also comes, and as that athlete starts reaching standard performance of an exercise, what we start to see is what we are after, and that is generalization of those strength and motor skills to activities of daily living. So even as an athlete is striving towards or working towards meeting standard of that exercise, as they are, again, consistently and within their current capability, achieving greater and greater performance of each exercise, over time, we're going to see those generalized to those activities of daily living, which is the whole reason why we are incorporating fitness into this individual's life. So independence is not about the athlete being able to create their own workout program and go and do it on their own. Of course, that could be a goal for some individuals, but we can still have independent performance of an exercise even while the athlete is being coached by someone who is trained and knowledgeable and has an Autism Fitness certification. You know, just as an aside, kind of helps. But when we are considering what does independence mean, it's not, oh, they're going to show up to the gym by themselves and go through the whole routine. It's that they need minimal guidance and support in order to complete this or multiple exercises. And again, as they continue to master those exercises, those skills are going to show up in a variety of different settings. So the quality of life overall is elevated because now we have an individual who is more independent, not only in the gym or clinic or home fitness setting, but they're also more independent in their day-to-day life, which is what we are after in the first place. And I guess in the last place too. I hope this has been helpful for you. If you have comments on this or questions, please leave them in the comments section below. I'm happy to answer them. And if you have a topic you'd like me to cover in a future edition of Autism Fitness Tuesday Training, leave that in the comments section below. I'd love to answer all of your questions, anything that you want to talk about, any topic that you've been considering in terms of programming, positive behavior support as it relates to exercise and fitness programming, or how to set up a great program in a home or clinic. I'm here to answer your questions. And if you're ready to become an Autism Fitness Certified Pro and join the Movement for Movement, you can go to autismfitness.com, download the course syllabus, or you can register and start your coursework today. The new program has all of the greatest aspects of autism fitness programming that have been developed and tested and redeveloped over almost a decade now. And we want to serve the autism and neurodivergent population all around the globe. You can be part of that. I'm Autism Fitness founder Eric Chessen, leading the movement for movement. Thank you very much for watching.